Disclaimer: the following program is designed to offend, provoke, and challenge your religious sensibilities. It contains content that will likely offend anyone who holds religion sacred. This is for those with thick skin or a taste for the harsh truth. If you're easily offended or cherish your religious views, please turn off now. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned. All right, welcome back to Troll the Verse, where biblical inspiration runs on reruns and the patriarchs prove that originality is completely optional when you've got family trauma and a goat. Today, we're cracking open Genesis 26, a chapter that boldly asks, what if we just did Abraham's story again, but with slightly worse dialogue? Because why write new material when you can slap a mustache on Abraham, rename an Isaac, and recycle the same plot lines from a few chapters ago like a low-budget soap opera? Well, that's basically what we've got here. We've got it all. Famine, lying that Rebekah is his wife, wells getting filled in out of spite, and somehow the most dramatic thing in this entire chapter is a treaty negotiation about dirt. And God shows up not to praise Isaac, but to remind him, hey, I'm only doing this because your dad was obedient. You're just a legacy admission. So if you've ever wondered what happens when you take nepotism, divine threats, and well digging and try to pass it off as sacred history, well, congrats, you're about to watch Genesis do a rerun for an entire chapter. Let's get into it. We open with a famine, but not the old famine. Whoever's writing this felt the need to clarify that this is a different famine than the one in Abraham's time, which is strange because Abraham actually went through two famines, one in Genesis 12:10 and another in 21. But Genesis acts like there was just one. I guess they got tired of keeping track and just decided to merge both stories under one vague label. That's how the chapter starts, cleaning up its own narrative sloppiness. Isaac heads to Gerar to meet Abimelech, the same place Abraham ran to, the same royal name. No explanation is offered for how this Abimelech is still around. Either he's a title passed down through generations, or he's just been sitting on the throne for over a century unbothered. The story doesn't pause to clarify, it just assumes no one's paying attention. Then Jehovah appears to Isaac. Not in a dream, not through a messenger. The text says he appears, which would be totally fine if we ignored the part of the Bible that says that's not supposed to happen. According to Exodus 33:20, no one can see God and live. But here's Isaac just standing there while God talks directly to him about where to camp. So the theology either changed halfway through the Pentateuch, or no one thought to line up the claims before calling it scripture. God tells Isaac not to go to Egypt, which, given the famine setup, is basically a dare. It's the biblical version of don't press that button, delivered in the middle of a full-blown food shortage. And instead of offering a real solution, God just tells him to sojourn in this land. You know, the land already owned by other people. No purchase, no deal, no divine deed. Just go live there. Because when you're chosen, trespassing becomes inheritance. And what does Isaac do? He almost listens. He doesn't go all the way to Egypt. He just sets up shop in Gerar, a Philistine border town on the way to Egypt. It's obedience by technicality, like standing at the threshold of disobedience and hoping God won't notice. That's like a child saying, well, I didn't go into Egypt, I just camped next door. It's the equivalent of Bill Clinton saying, well, I didn't inhale, totally stupid. Then comes the speech from God, same recycled promise from Abraham's days. Land, descendants like stars, and global blessing through your seed. But now, with a new clause added, it says, because Abraham obeyed. In other words, Isaac gets everything by sheer bloodline. He didn't earn it, he didn't suffer for it, he didn't even pass a test. The blessing is just handed over, like estate planning. This isn't a story about faith or growth, it's about nepotism. Isaac is coasting on Abraham's obedience like it's a family trust fund. No merit, no effort, just inherited status, squatting rights, and a God who plays favorites. And Isaac doesn't even react. There's no altar, no prayer, no vow, no recorded words at all. Abraham at least built altars every time he sneezed in God's direction. Isaac hears the voice of God, sees him, receives a direct promise, and does nothing but settle down in Gerar. That's the entire response, just a man with a tent and zero sense of occasion. Even the phrasing in verse 1, besides the first famine, feels less like narration and more like an editorial patch, like someone glued this episode into the story later and needed a quick sentence to make it fit. It doesn't read like revelation, it reads like someone stapling folklore together and hoping no one notices the edges. 2 verses ago, God looked Isaac in the face and said, I am with thee. And here we are, barely a scene later, and Isaac's already terrified. The divine pep talk God gave Isaac evaporated on contact, I guess. Whatever reassurance God was trying to offer clearly didn't survive Isaac's walk to town. So, when the men of Gerar ask about Rebekah, Isaac doesn't even hesitate. He lies, not creatively, not reluctantly, just blurts out the family default. She's my sister. This is the third time this lie has been used. Abraham did it twice with his wife Sarah. At this point, it's not a strategy, it's a family tradition. Rebekah doesn't even get a vote. She's just shoved into the same role Sarah played, a human shield for the patriarch's cowardice. But here's the grim upgrade in this chapter. Sarah wasn't a mother when Abraham did it. Rebekah is. Isaac has already had children with her. He's already watched her carry the so-called chosen bloodline, and he still sells her out the second he feels unsafe. This isn't just wife endangerment, it's pimping out the mother of your kids. That's a whole new tier of moral collapse. So I guess he's the father of nations, unless it costs him something. There's no concern for her, no backup plan. Isaac's entire thought process is, they might kill me, so I'll sacrifice her instead. It's the level of spiritual maturity from Yahweh's hand-picked heir. And how does this deception fall apart? Not through divine intervention. No angel shows up, no prophetic dreams. Just Abimelech looking out a window. That's it. One casual glance from a pagan king catches Isaac playing with Rebekah, definitely not the kind of activity you do with your sister, and the whole lie unravels. Abimelech calls him in, and Isaac admits it. No apology, no repentance, just the same excuse, I thought I might die. And here's the bombshell we see here that nobody talks about. Abimelech says, someone already slept with Rebekah. Not hypothetically, not maybe. His exact words are, as a little thing, one of the people had lain with thy wife, and thou hadst brought upon us guilt. So notice here the past tense, the word had, lain with thy wife. So someone likely already slept with Rebekah. Nobody asks what happened. Was this consensual? We may never know. No justice, no divine outrage from God. Just a pagan king realizing his entire kingdom could be under wrath because Isaac let his wife get used to save his own skin. Once again, it's the outsider who shows more moral clarity than the covenant family. Abimelech, who isn't part of Yahweh's promise, doesn't need a commandment or a prophet. He just immediately bans anyone from touching Isaac or Rebekah under threat of death. Meanwhile, the chosen man sits there with no shame, no consequences, and no clue. So let's sum this up. The patriarch lies, sacrifices his wife, pimps her out, possibly lets her get violated, and when caught, takes zero responsibility, and they're all powerful God? Totally silent here, no rebuke, no punishment, because when you're chosen, even your cowardice gets canonized. But hey, whatever, right? This is the God you guys exalt and hold above all others. Good choice. Anyway, next section. Verse 12 drops a miracle harvest right in the middle of a famine, a hundredfold return in a food crisis. No rain, no irrigation, no explanation, just pure divine stimulus. And what does Isaac do in response? Nothing. Again, no altar, no prayer, no praise. God hands him a personal economic revolution, and he treats it like a scratch-off win. The first recorded reaction to divine provision is complete silence. Then the text doubles down. Isaac becomes great, then greater, then very great. It's like someone hitting the thesaurus on wealthy and hoping repetition will impress you. The writing is straining to sell the moment, but all it really does is expose how desperate the narrative is to make Isaac feel important. We get flocks, herds, and abundant service, which is a sanitized way of saying he's built an entire labor force. You don't accumulate this much wealth through blessings alone. You do it with other people's hands, digging, hauling, herding, likely without pay. The covenant doesn't abolish hierarchy, it builds one. You know, and I was thinking, this is God basically rewarding Isaac for pimping out his wife. This is the kind of stuff that really makes me mad. It makes me mad because I was indoctrinated into this as a kid. So I didn't realize how disgusting it really was. But when you're grown and you read it for yourself, it hits so different. Because this isn't just a story about Isaac being blessed. It's God approving of what he did. Isaac lies, throws his wife under the bus to save himself, and then God turns around and gives him a hundredfold harvest. That's divine reward for exploitation. And you realize the entire moral framework you were handed as a kid was built on this exact kind of garbage. Anyway, I'll continue. I don't want to go off on a tangent. Just irritates me thinking about it. The locals see his success and immediately retaliate, not with war, but with dirt. They go around and clog every well Abraham's servants had dug. Not take them, not tax them, just bury them in a desert. This is self-sabotage as vengeance. You're mad at a guy for prospering, so you eliminate your own water supply. That's the kind of logic that runs this world. Abimelech shows up and tells Isaac to leave. No accusation, no crime, just you're getting too powerful. And Isaac goes quietly. No protest, no appeal to covenant, just folds his tent and walks away. But remember, this land was supposed to be his. God swore it to Abraham forever. This is the promised land. Isaac is the promised heir. So why is he acting like a squatter being politely evicted? If the land really belonged to him, this would have been the moment to say so. Instead, he backs off like a subletter whose paperwork never got approved. He relocates to the Valley of Gerar and starts redigging the old wells, not new ones. He's just retracing Abraham's steps and renaming each one the same thing it was called before. There's no innovation here, no new legacy, just historical reenactment disguised as progress. Eventually, his servants dig a fresh well, the locals fight over it, so he names it Strife. They dig another, same fight, that one's hatred. Now, these aren't acts of faith, they're monuments to every confrontation. Every name is a grudge. Every label is a reminder that he doesn't belong here. He's not building a future. He's marking territory in a land that keeps rejecting him. Then finally, they dig a third well, and the neighbors give up. Isaac names it Enlargements, and suddenly decides this must be God's stamp of approval. Not peace, not unity, just the absence of resistance equals blessing. Because in this theology, if no one's fighting you, it must mean God is on your side. Forget justice, forget ownership. The green light is just people being too tired to keep filling in your wells. This entire episode is treated like a triumph. But what actually happened? Isaac got run off his land, had his wells destroyed, lost 2 more to the locals, and finally got left alone on the 3rd try. And somehow that counts as blessing. Not because God intervened, not because justice was served, just because the shepherds got tired of fighting. That's all it took for Isaac to declare divine favor. And through all of this, not once does God show up. No fire from heaven, no pillar of cloud, no voice in the night, just a man getting pushed around and deciding that basic nonviolence equals success. The narrative tries to sell it as providence, but all it really shows is that Isaac has no spine, and the promise means nothing when someone else is holding the shovel. God finally reappears, but only once Isaac is settled, unbothered, and safely out of harm's way. He stayed silent through famine, forced migration, and hostile land disputes, but now that things are quiet, Jehovah drops by again to repeat the same line, I am with you. Convenient timing. Faith doesn't need to be strengthened when there's no crisis. This is divine safe mode. He only gets reception in calm zones. And as always, the promise is attributed to Abraham, not Isaac's actions, not Isaac's faith, just lineage. The blessing is still running on legacy credit. Now finally, Isaac builds an altar, not after the miracle harvest, not after escaping enemies. He waits until the shepherds stop fighting and the threats are gone. It's reactive worship dressed up as piety. He acknowledges God once things stabilize. Reverse devotion at its finest. Blessing first, faith second. Naturally, a well gets dug, because Isaac has a compulsion. He can't settle anywhere without putting a hole in the ground. 5 wells in this chapter alone. The man has no vision, no mission, just a pathological need to dig and name things after his latest trauma. Then, Abimelech returns, flanked by his personal friend and his army commander. That's not a friendly visit, that's intimidation theater. But Isaac welcomes them like they're there for brunch. No fear, no guards, no suspicion, just come in, let's talk. You'd think the guy who got evicted and had his water supply buried might show some spine. Isaac does ask the right questions, though. He says, why are you here? You hated me, you sent me away. And Abimelech lies straight to his face. We didn't touch you, we only did good. We sent you away in peace. No mention of filled wells, no mention of displacement, just gaslighting and historical revisionism. It's a formal apology that skips the part where anything actually went wrong. And Isaac just swallows it, doesn't challenge the lie, doesn't ask for reparations. Instead, he throws a banquet. He feeds the very men who displaced him. This isn't diplomacy, it's therapy dinner for the oppressors. No restitution, no accountability, just appetizers and oath signing. The oath itself gets treated like a sacred event, just like the divine promises. Isaac preaches to God on one hand and swears loyalty to Philistines on the other. The covenant with the king ends up being more actionable than the one from heaven. For all the talk about being chosen, it's the human agreement that actually secures his place. Then, right on cue, the servants find water again. Isaac names the well Sheba, oath, and now the city is Beersheba, well of the oath. Not named for survival, not named for God, named after the political pact that made everyone feel better. The implication isn't that God provided, it's that the treaty made the water flow. And this is what Isaac treats as his legacy. Not vision, not faith, not leadership, just a renamed city and a mutual non-aggression pact with the same people who bulldozed his inheritance. He never establishes sovereignty. He never asserts the promise. He just finds places that won't push him around and renames the holds he's allowed to keep. Every altar, every well, every city in his story is an echo of Abraham's. The man's entire life is a carbon copy with less conviction. The promised land ends up negotiated by handshake and sealed with dinner. And the most revealing part? He needed a treaty to stay on the land God supposedly gave him forever. Eternal covenant, unless your neighbor frowns. Then it's back to well number 6 and renaming the dirt. Esau turns 40 and marries 2 Hittite women, and just like that, the whole chapter closes not with a bang, but with family disappointment. After a full episode of Isaac digging holes, making treaties, and finally pretending to stand on his own, the last word goes to his son, who marries the wrong people. There's no commentary, no explanation, no divine intervention, just they were a bitterness of spirit. Because of course they were. Heaven help you if you marry outside the approved ethno club. It doesn't matter if these women were kind, wise, faithful, or loyal. Their tribal ID card wasn't stamped with Yahweh's logo, so they're a problem by default. It's just xenophobic melodrama, and the text doesn't even pretend to hide it. It doesn't say Esau sinned, doesn't say the women led him astray, it just states that their very existence in the family made Isaac and Rebekah miserable. And that's how thin this divine dynasty has become, one cross-cultural marriage, and suddenly the patriarchs are spiritually gutted. It's a perfect capstone to the Isaac saga, passive leadership, compromised inheritance, and now bitterness over the next generation. No altar, no prophecy, no blessing, just the exhausted parents sitting in a tent, quietly hating their daughters-in-law. Chapter closed. Curtain dropped. Everyone's tired and vaguely resentful. And that's Genesis 26. Isaac lies, digs holes, gets bullied off his land, throws a feast for the guys who harassed him, and finally prays after everything's calm. Oh, and Esau marries 2 Hittites just to round things out with family drama. Next chapter, schemes, scams, and blessing theft. As always, I'll see you in the next one.